Okay, well, this next story is called The Spirals. And at some time when I was about 6, I'm going to guess, we moved out of the big 2-story house that my grandfather Charlie built on Ray Avenue, and we moved to a little bitty house, another house that my grandfather owned, on Sherman Avenue. And the little bitty house was right around the corner from their house, their big house on Tuscarawas Avenue. So I think this move was one of convenience, really, because I was entering kindergarten. And the school was right across the street. So it was very convenient for me to walk to school. It was just across the street. And it was very convenient for me to be able to stay with my grandmother and my grandmother and my grandfather, over at their house on Tuscarawas Avenue when Mother had to go away in the evenings. So there were some built-in babysitters there. Anyway, when I entered kindergarten, back in those days, most of what you did in kindergarten were arts and crafts. And our teacher, like many other teachers, would design the activities around the months of the year or special events, holidays, and so forth. For instance, you know, at Thanksgiving we would be given a piece of construction paper and crayons, and we would draw the outline of our hand on the paper and turn it into a turkey. We would color eggs at Easter the old-fashioned way. There were no coloring kits back in those days. We would use food coloring and Q-tips and brushes and paint our eggs by hand so that we had these beautiful individual creations that we had created. You know, and things like that. We would be given a little white piece of paper or a piece of paper and taught how to fold it up, scissors cut out, and you'd have snowflakes for the Christmas tree. But there was a lot of time left over for our own individual creativity. And many times the teacher would give us a piece of construction paper and a box of crayons, and we would be allowed to create whatever we wanted to create. Well, I drew the same thing over and over and over and over again. And I drew a plateau that was all brown on the front, and I put a little grass on the top of the plateau. And always standing on the plateau would be a very tall, beautiful lady. And I colored her so that her body was facing front, but she was always looking in profile at something that we just couldn't see. Her arms were spirals. And I drew this scene over and over and over again. Occasionally I would put her in another colored dress, but it was always a long dress. One day my teacher came up to my desk, and she again saw that I was, you know, drawing something else, and she said, "Kimmie, why don't you ever draw anything else?" And I said, "Well, I like this. I like this drawing." And she said, "Well, what is this drawing?" And I looked up at her and I said, "It's Utah." And she said, "Utah?" And I said, "Uh-huh." And she said, "Well, what's in Utah?" And I said, "This lady." And she said, "Okay, well, it's a pretty picture. That's a pretty lady." And I said, "Thank you." Another time she came over to my desk. I was drawing the very same thing. And she looked down at this creation of mine. And she said to me, "Now, Kimmie, we know that people's arms don't really look like this, don't we?" And I looked up at her and I said, "Yes, they do." Well, I thought she wasn't a very good teacher to know that these aren't arms and that everybody's arms don't look like that. Well, sometime later, I believe that she and my mother spoke at one of these open houses, because my mother gets to the open house and there's all Kimmie's artwork displayed, and it's all this lady on this plateau. And the teacher said to my mother, "So, I understand that you have some connection to Utah." And my mother said, "What?" And she said, "Well, Kimmie says that these pictures are Utah." And my mother said, "She says that it's Utah." And the teacher said, "Yeah, that's all she draws is Utah. And she seems to know that this lady is in Utah. I just figured you had relatives in Utah." And my mother said, "We have no connection to Utah. We've never been to Utah. We never planned to go to Utah. And we have no connection to Utah whatsoever." Well, I think that was another one of those situations that made my mother feel very uncomfortable, to learn that I was now doing things that were a little out of the box, and now I'm sharing them with other people. So with that, we'll move on to a little information about my grandfather, Charlie, and then we'll continue on for what is yet to come. Thanks for watching.